I'm going to start with a story you've probably heard before. You see a cheap Hollowbody guitar, pay a couple of $100s, and 3 weeks later you're dealing with buzzy pickup noise, a warped neck, or a finish that chips the first time you take it out of the case. The regret that follows is real, and it's why many players hesitate before splurging on something that looks beautiful but might turn out to be a disappointment. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In today's video, I'm digging into the Ibanez Artcore AM2000H in that striking brown sunburst finish to see if it actually lives up to the price tag or if it's just another pretty face. First off, let's talk about who this guitar is built for. If you're a semi-professional or an advanced hobbyist who spends a good chunk of time in jazz, blues, or clean-tone rock, the Artcore line is meant to give you a fully Hollowbody feel without breaking the bank. The AM2000H pushes that concept a step further with a figured Anigre top that gives the body a bit more visual grain and, more importantly, a slight tonal density that you don't get on the entry-level Artcore models. On the other hand, if you're a heavy distortion player who lives for tight, high-gain sounds, the extra resonance of a Hollowbody might actually become a liability. The guitar will start to feed back at lower volumes, and the natural warmth can get lost under layers of distortion. So, for crunch-seeking metalheads, this probably isn't the smartest buy. Now, let's walk through a typical day in the life of this instrument. I pulled the AM2000H out of its gig case, hit a warm-up routine with a couple of arpeggios and minor, and immediately noticed the balance. The body, while sizable, sits comfortably on the thigh because the neck is a 3-piece mahogany/maple construction that keeps the weight centered. The Ebony Fingerboard gives a slick surface that makes fast chord changes feel fluid, especially when you're alternating between jazz-voiced chords and single-note lines. The two humbucking pickups, tuned for a warm, rounded tone, respond nicely when you dial in the clean channel on a modest amp. The sweet spot is right around 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. on a typical practice amp. Nothing exotic, just a nice, warm articulation that suits fingerstyle and light comping. One of the practical strengths that you'll only discover after playing a few songs is the way the Hollowbody handles feedback at moderate volume. The Anigre top combined with the mahogany sides gives the instrument a bit of natural damping. When I cranked the amp to a low mid-rhythm level, the neck didn't scream for attention like some cheap Hollowbodies do. Instead, the feedback was controllable, which is a huge plus for live players who need to stay on stage without constantly fighting squeal. Also, the Ebony Fingerboard's natural oiliness helps keep your fingers from slipping when you're bending notes for blues licks. That little tactile advantage often goes unnoticed until you've tried a few different fingerboards. On the flip side, there are practical weaknesses you need to know before you order. First, the guitar's resonance, the thing that gives you that airy, open sound, also means it can be a bit dead when you're looking for a cutting, bright tone. Because the pickups are humbuckers and not single coils, you lose a certain amount of clarity that players who love that crisp, glass-like articulation might miss. I tried the AM2000H with a bright clean channel on a Fender Twin Reverb simulator, and it still sounded more velvety than sparkling. If you rely heavily on that sparkling articulation for funk or bright country picking, you might need to add an external EQ pedal or consider a different instrument. Another point to consider is the finish and hardware durability. The brown sunburst lacquer is gorgeous, but because it's a single-coat finish over the figured Anigre, it is a touch more susceptible to surface scratches than a high-gloss poly wrap you see on some higher-priced models. In my own experience, after a few months of gigging, you'll notice minor scuffs if you're not careful with your strap or case. That said, the hardware itself, tone knobs, output jack, and bridge are all standard Ibanez pieces. They're solid but not premium. The bridge, for instance, is a fixed type that offers good intonation but no tremolo options. If you crave a floating tremolo for dive bombs or whammy bar tricks, you'll have to look elsewhere or install an aftermarket bridge, which adds extra cost and effort. Let's talk about value for money. The price point of the AM2000H puts it in the mid-range category, sitting above the entry-level Artcore models but below professional-grade Hollowbodies like those from Gibson or Epiphone. What you're really paying for is the stepped-up aesthetic figured Anigre and an Ebony Fingerboard plus that extra weight distribution that makes the instrument less neck-heavy. The tonal improvement over the lower-priced Artcore models is subtle but noticeable if you're used to the thinner, paper-thin sound of cheaper hollow bodies. It's not a miracle upgrade, it's a refinement that feels